Hey everyone. Tonight we're diving into the most boring story to fall asleep to. Or so you think. You're not in your bed anymore. You're in a cramped wooden hut. Your blanket is a wool sack. And the floor is, well, mostly mud and chicken droppings. Welcome to your new life as a medieval peasant, where hygiene is a concept as foreign as indoor plumbing. And don't worry, it only gets worse from here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And if you're listening right now, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you all fall asleep. Now, turn down the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise. And let's get started on tonight's journey together. The rooster's been up since before dawn. But you were already awake. Hard to sleep when your bed's stuffed with straw that smells suspiciously like last season's goat. You sit up slowly, careful not to bump your head on the low rafters, and immediately step on something moist. It squelches. You hope it's a turnip, but you know better. That's a peasant life. You shuffle toward the door, brushing a spider web off your forehead. Your linen shift sticks to your skin, not from sweat, but from existence. Your home doesn't have a chimney, so last night's fire left a thin coating of soot on everything, including your teeth. You run your tongue over them and taste ash and regret. Outside, the sun hasn't fully risen. Dew sparkles on the grass. The pigs are already rooting in the mud, snorting like they've got places to be. The outhouse, You wish it's just the far side of the field, a spot behind the bramble bush that everyone uses. You know your neighbor's been there already. He always sings when he goes. Weirdly enthusiastic for someone relieving himself in open air. But you're debating. Do you want to walk barefoot through cold, wet grass to do your business behind a hedge? Or just use the chamber pot, the one that's already half full and under your bed? Last time someone emptied it, they accidentally sloshed it on their ankle. Last time you emptied it, your little brother tripped over it, and now you're not allowed near the neighbor's goose anymore. You sigh. Goose drama aside, today is wash day, or at least face splash day. You pour a bit of cold water into a wooden bowl. It's the same water you used yesterday for rinsing your hands. A bug floats in it. You flick it away. Hygiene, as you know it, is a flexible thing. The cloth you use to wipe your face is stiff with old soap residue and something that might be dried egg. You dab it on your cheeks anyway. Congratulations, you're clean enough to be ignored by the priest, but not clean enough to avoid attracting flies. The smell of manure is everywhere, but you're used to it. In fact, you've started associating it with breakfast. And sure enough, your mother is stirring something over the hearth that smells like boiled oats and disappointment. She hands you a wooden spoon with a nod. No greeting, just vibes. You take your bowl outside to eat. The sunrise is golden, the wind crisp, and a chicken jumps onto your lap with absolutely no respect for personal boundaries. It pecks your spoon. You sigh and share your breakfast because fighting a chicken before 6 a.m. isn't the hill you want to die on. As you eat, you think about yesterday, when Thomas down the road claimed he'd found a tooth in the well bucket. No one has drunk from it since, but no one's done anything about it either. Hydration is important. But is it ghost tooth important? Historians still debate whether peasant communities actively understood water contamination or just accepted stomach cramps as part of the deal. You finish eating, wipe your mouth on your sleeve, and prepare for the real morning ritual, brushing your teeth. Sort of. You chew on a birch twig until it frays, then use it to scrub at the worst of the grime. Your cousin swears by this. Says it makes his breath smell like trees. You personally think it just makes you smell like wet stick. But hey, better than fermented leek stew. Now that your face is sort of washed and your mouth is twig fresh, you return to the hut to change into your outer clothes. They've been hanging by the hearth to dry, which in peasant terms means absorb more smoke. They're warm. Yes, but they also make you smell like a campfire that someone tried to cook onions on. As you step back outside, the neighbor's kids are already chasing a goat that escaped its pen. One of them is barefoot, squealing with laughter. You can't remember the last time you were that carefree. Probably before you knew what ringworm was, or before you realized that the only thing separating your sleeping area from the chicken coop is a pile of firewood and denial. You stretch your arms and breathe in deep. The scent of manure, wet wool, and distant bread baking fills your lungs. It's a terrible, glorious symphony of smells. And yet, this is home. You, the most boring character in the most boring story to fall asleep to, are somehow alive in a world that's endlessly strange. It's a dirty world, but it's yours. And as the sun climbs higher and the fields call your name, you know that your day is just beginning. Just maybe try not to step in anything squishy this time. You step around the corner of the hut, clutching your wooden bowl like it's a security blanket. But no amount of oatmeal clinging to the rim is going to protect you from what comes next. The bathroom situation, or more accurately, the total and spectacular lack of one. If you need to relieve yourself during daylight hours, your best option is a spot behind the brambles out past the goat pen. It's private, sort of. Depends on the goat's mood. Really. Sometimes he stares, judgingly. The toilet, if we can even call it that, is just a shallow hole in the ground. You dug it yourself last week. You try to aim well and backfill with dirt. If you forget to bring a stick to stir the earth, well, things pile up fast. Sometimes literally, at night. You use the chamber pot, a squat ceramic bowl with a handle, which is deceptively heavy when full. You're not proud of it, especially when it sloshes and your bare foot catches the edge. One clumsy moment and suddenly your dignity is soaking into the floorboards. You're not the only one who struggles with the whole, waste situation. The entire village does. There's a designated dumping area beyond the hedges, a pit, a stinking heap of refuse, and a graveyard of old sandals lost to bad footing. People toss chamber pot contents there at dawn and dusk. Unless they're lazy, then they dump it out the back window, which is exactly why you never walk behind old Edric's hut in the morning. Not unless you want a free, unwanted rinse. Historians still debate whether peasants understood disease transmission from waste. Some argue they connected filth with illness intuitively. Others say it was more about bad smells offending the soul than anything microbial. Whatever the reason, you know better than to drink from the stream downhill of the dumping pit. You learn that the hard way after a week-long case of the belly curse, as Granny called it,
And a sheep that sounds like
Speaking
it's
of
arguing
Granny,
with someone. It's
she has opinions
peaceful.
about your
Then
habits.
The goat bleats from 2 feet away,
You
and
young'uns
nearly fall
don't
into
squat
your own
low
hole.
enough.
The goat wins again.
She grumbles,
Later in the day,
chewing a sprig of
you help
fennel.
your cousin empty the big
That's why
clay
your knees
pot
are
used
weak and
for
your crops
multiple
don't thrive.
change. It's sloshing and warm.
You nod
A
solemnly
smell
and
hits your
promise to
face
squat like the
betrayal.
ancestors
You
would have wanted.
gag, he gag.
There's a
Both
public
gag
latrine
and
over in the
chorus
manor
like a medieval
grounds,
boy band of
reserved mostly for the
Turn
steward
the
and
pot to the
higher-ups.
refuse area, making small
It's
talk
basically
about
a
the
plank
weather
with
to
holes
distract
over
from
a
the
stream
fact that you are
luxury by your
literally holding a
standards.
communal bucket of excrement.
The peasants
Think of
once
the
asked for a
rain.
communal
You
version in the
say,
village.
eyes watering.
The Lord laughed,
So,
then raised
washes
taxes.
away the smell. When you tip
Instead,
the pot into the pit, a
you make
small
do.
puff of steam
You've learned to carry a
rises.
cloth
It's
soaked
not
in
cold
vinegar
enough
under
to
your nose when
justify
doing your
that.
business
You
in
don't ask
summer.
questions. You walk back
It
to the
helps.
hut, arms aching, and
Sort
wonder
of,
how nobles deal with
but
any
only
of
if the
this.
wind is on your
Do they
side and the
even
flies
poop?
are feeling
There are
merciful.
rumors that kings have
Toilet
golden
paper.
toilets, or at least chests
You
with
wish
lids.
it's
You
moss
once
if
saw
you're
one
lucky.
in a traveling merchant's
Leaves if
sketchbook.
you're
A
desperate.
velvet-lined chair with a hole in
Someone
it,
once tried a
guarded
piece
by
of
2
wool
footmen
scrap
and
and got a
good
rash that looked like a
fancy.
map of
But
France.
here, among the straw and
Now there's a
soil,
rhyme
you
kids
just
sing
have
about
your
it.
hole behind the hedge.
You don't sing
Your
along,
paw
it hits
and
too close to
your
home.
determination not to trip.
Odd fact, some people say that
Still,
noble
there's
ladies
an
in
odd
far-off
kind of
cities have
rhythm
assistants
to it
who
all.
hold
A weird
perfumed
dignity in
cloths for
handling
them
your
while
own
they
mess. Quite literally,
go.
you don't rely on perfume.
You try to imagine this. A servant just standing there, eyes politely averted, holding lavender-scented linen like a knight with a sword. You wonder if that servant tells jokes to pass the time. Or sings.
And the last pot is emptied.
Probably not. As you squat behind the brambles, you hear bird song, distant hammering from the blacksmith's forge, and a sheep that sounds like it's arguing with someone. It's strangely peaceful. Then the goat bleats from 2 feet away, and you nearly fall into your own hole. The goat wins again. Later in the day, you help your cousin empty the big clay pot used for multiple chamberings. It's sloshing and warm. A smell hits your face like betrayal. You gag. He gags. You both gag in chorus like a medieval boy band of misery. You carry the pot to the refuse area, making small talk about the weather to distract from the fact that you are literally holding a communal bucket of excrement. Think it'll rain, you say? Eyes watering. Hope so, he replies. Washes away the smell faster. When you tip the pot into the pit, a small puff of steam rises. It's not cold enough to justify that. You don't ask questions. You walk back to the hut, arms aching, and wonder how nobles deal with any of this. Do they even poop? There are rumors that kings have golden toilets, or at least chests with lids. You once saw one in a traveling merchant's sketchbook, a velvet-lined chair with a hole in it, guarded by 2 footmen and a curtain. Fancy. But here, among the straw and soil, you just have your hole behind the hedge, your pot, and your determination not to trip. Still, there's an odd kind of rhythm to it all, a weird dignity in handling your own mess. Quite literally, you don't rely on perfumes or flushable comfort. You deal with things as they come messily, clumsily, but honestly. And besides, at least you know how to avoid stepping in anything you can't explain. Nobles bet they never learn where the goats like to go. As the sun sets and the last pot is emptied, you take a deep breath of manure-tinged evening air and stretch your back. You survived another day of the medieval bathroom game. Kind of makes your modern toilet look like a throne, doesn't it? You're standing by the fire pit, holding a crust of yesterday's bread like it's a bar of soap, which, come to think of it, is about as effective
You're not so sure.
Soap,
You feel
in
like
your
a damn
world,
squirrel with
isn't
a
exactly
sinus infection. Back at home,
reliable
you warm yourself by
or
the fire
common
and contemplate
or
your
good.
options.
You've
You
heard the
can
word
oil your
before.
skin with animal fat.
Soap.
Keeps the cold out.
It sounds
keeps the
clean,
stink in.
almost
You can
elegant.
sprinkle yourself with dried
But for a
lavender
medieval
if you
peasant
hadn't
like
already
you,
used it in soup.
it's a
Or you
luxury
could just
item like
accept
silk
your
or
fate,
shoes that match.
clean for an hour, then
If you're
right
lucky,
back to sweat, soot,
someone in your
and
village knows how to make it.
questionable odors. Odd fact,
If you're really
some
lucky, it won't
nobles
peel the top
supposedly
layer of
use
your
bread
skin off.
crusts to blot oil from their faces.
Today, you're
You
trying a
tried that
homemade
once.
mixture your aunt
It
swears
attracted
by.
rats. They
It's
were
made of
very
lye and leftover
enthusiastic.
animal fat.
You were less so.
The lye was
Hair,
boiled from
of course,
ashes
is
scraped
another
out of the hearth
battleground.
last week.
You don't shampoo it.
The fat
because
from the
word
pig that
doesn't
mysteriously
exist.
stopped
You
squealing
rinse
and
it
started
sometimes.
sizzling.
You tie it
You
back.
smear a chunk
You
of
pick
this
out
grayish-brown
small
goo
dirt
onto
and
your
the
arms.
occasional beat, but for
It
the
smells
most
like
part, it
sadness
just
and
is
mutton.
wild.
It
Tangled,
lathers like
proudly
disappointment.
medieval.
But
Your
it does
cousin
remove
once
the
tried to
worst
wash
of the
his hair
grime,
with fermented
assuming you don't
beer.
mind the
It
mild
worked,
chemical
sorta.
burns.
He smelled like a tavern for 3
You rinse
days
in a
and
barrel
goose
of
followed him
rainwater
around
that
like
has
he
a
was in
mosquito
love. It was
problem and
oddly
floaters
flattering.
you'd rather
For
not
now,
identify.
You settle for a vinegar rinse.
Cleanish.
Burns your scalp slightly and
Good
makes
enough.
your eyes water, but at least it's
Historians
doing
still
something.
debate
Or at
whether
least it
medieval
feels
soap was
like it.
ever
You
used for
remember a
personal
story your
hygiene at all.
grandmother used to tell about a
Some
knight so
argue it was
clean he
mostly for
mistaken an
laundry.
angel. Turns
Others
out he
insist
was
people
just rich
bathed
enough
with
to
it,
afford imported
or at
soap
least
from
near it.
Castile. You're not aiming for
You wonder if
angelic.
there was
You'd
ever
settle
a
for not
peasant who
repellent.
just
That's why your
held the
neighbors
soap
claim
and
they
hoped
can
it
tell how
absorbed the
recently
stink
you
by
bathed just by
osmosis.
your aura.
Of
You're not
course,
sure what that means.
you don't always
You
get to
once caught a
choose
girl
when
sniffing her
or if
sleeve
you
after
bathe.
hugging you. She didn't run away.
Water is
So maybe
suspicious.
you passed the test.
People say
By
it
late
opens your
evening,
pores,
your
letting
clean
illness in.
feeling is already
Some villagers
faded.
believe you can
fed
drown from
chickens,
breathing too
shoveled
close to a full
dung,
tub.
and stepped in at least to suspicious
A
puddles.
bath, in their
There's
minds,
something
is a
quietly
flirtation
satisfying
with
in
death.
knowing you tried. You may not smell
But it's
like
summer,
rosewater, and you
and sweat has
certainly
turned
don't
your shirt into a
sparkle, but
seke.
you've earned your right to fall
Much
asleep,
wetter skin.
crusty and content.
So today,
Tomorrow,
you
you'll
brave
probably
it.
skip the soap
You find a
entirely.
quiet spot
Or
by the
maybe you
stream
just
and
rub
strip
yourself
down,
with a damp cloth and call it
wary of any
innovation.
passing
Either
livestock
way,
or
you'll
worse,
still be
children.
here stubborn,
The water is
scrubby,
freezing.
and completely
It bites your skin like tiny medieval ice fairies slapping you with reeds. You dunk your head, come up gasping, and wipe algae out of your eyes. Congratulations. You now smell like moss and pain. You grab your scrub rag, which is more whole than cloth. You scrub your arms, your legs, your feet. You skip the important bits because the water is too cold and you're not a hero. Also, something just touched your ankle and you'd rather not find out what. You emerge from the stream shivering and vaguely cleaner. Your aunt insists this is good for your soul. You're not so sure. You feel like a damp squirrel with a sinus infection. Back at home, you warm yourself by the fire and contemplate your options. You could oil your skin with animal fat. Keeps the cold out, keeps the stink in. You could sprinkle yourself with dried lavender if you hadn't already used it in soup. Or you could just accept your fate clean for an hour, then right back to sweat, soot, and questionable odors. Odd fact, some nobles supposedly used bread crust to blot oil from their faces. You tried that once? It attracted rats. They were very enthusiastic. You were less so. Hair, of course, is another battleground. You don't shampoo it, because that word doesn't exist. You rinse it sometimes. You tie it back. You pick out straw, dirt, and the occasional beetle. But for the most part, it just is. Wild. Tangled. Proudly medieval. Your cousin once tried to wash his hair with fermented beer. It worked. Sort of. He smelled like a tavern for 3 days and a goose followed him around like it was in love. It was oddly flattering. For now, you settle for a vinegar rinse. It burns your scalp slightly and makes your eyes water. But at least it's doing something. Or at least it feels like it. You remember a story your grandmother used to tell about a knight so clean he was mistaken for an angel. Turns out he was just rich enough to afford imported soap from Castile. You're not aiming for angelic. You'd settle for not repellent. It's funny your neighbors claim they can tell how recently you bathed just by your aura. You're not sure what that means, but you once caught a girl sniffing her sleeve after hugging you. She didn't run away. So maybe you passed the test. By late evening, your clean feeling is already fading. You fed chickens, shoveled dung, and stepped in at least 2 suspicious puddles. But there's something quietly satisfying in knowing you tried. You may not smell like rosewater, and you certainly don't sparkle, but you've earned your right to fall asleep crusty and content. Tomorrow, you'll probably skip the soap entirely, or maybe just rub yourself down with a damp cloth and call it innovation. Either way, you'll still be here stubborn, scruffy, and completely medieval. You're scratching your head again. Not out of boredom, but because something small, persistent, and very much alive is throwing a dance party in your hair. Welcome to Medieval Peasant Hair Care, a journey of patience, discomfort, and the never-ending quest to outwit lice. You sit on a stool outside your hut, sunlight hitting your shoulders, as your little sister picks through your hair with the practiced skill of someone who's fought this war before. She uses a fine-toothed comb carved from animal bone. It's more bone than comb now. Worn down by generations of peasants who all had the same problem: unwelcome guests on the scalp. Hold still, she says, squinting at your hairline. If I see one more louse doing cartwheels, I'm charging rent. You laugh then wince as she pulls out a live one and squashes it between her fingernails. Crunch. That's the sound of victory. And also mild nausea.
Like wet wood, boiled herbs,
You've heard stories of queens wearing wigs stuffed with perfume to cover lice infestations. At least you're not pretending you don't have them. You do have them. Everyone does. They're practically part of the family. Your uncle even gave his a name once. Sir Itchiness. He wasn't kidding. Odd fact. Some medieval people believed lice were a sign of holiness. The more you had, the more humble you were. Monks were especially notorious for this logic. The Lord tests us with pests, they said. Also, they keep us warm in winter. You can't confirm that second part, but it sounds like something people say when they've given up. Historians still debate whether medieval communities understood how lice spread. Some think people associated them with bad air or divine punishment. Others point to evidence of delousing rituals during religious fasts, as if picking bugs from your tunic was just another form of piety. Whatever the case, no one's inviting lice to leave anytime soon. You try to wash your hair once a week, which makes you the fancy one. Most of your friends rely on dry methods, brushing with straw, rubbing ashes into the scalp, or simply shaving it all off. Your neighbor did that once. Then the sun burned his head so badly he smelled like baked onions for days. You opt to keep your hair longish, not because it's stylish, but because it's less work. You pull it back with a piece of twine, ignoring the itchy spot behind your ear. Your sister hums as she combs something oddly cheerful for someone doing battlefield triage on your scalp. There's dignity in grooming. Even when the results are temporary, it's like fighting a never-ending war against invisible enemies, and every comb stroke is a tiny act of rebellion.
especially during the early
Your mother
middle
walks
ages.
by,
But as time
notices
went
the
on,
ritual,
public bathing became
and drops a sprig of
controversial.
rosemary in your
Why?
lap.
Because you're not just here
Put
to
this
get
behind your
clean.
ear,
You're here for the drama.
she says.
You listen as two older
Keeps the
women
lice out.
argue in the next
You
tub
nod
over
politely and
something
do
about
it.
a stolen pie.
It doesn't work,
Or maybe a stolen
but now you smell like
patella
roast
to the sound
lamb,
of
which is an
sloshing
upgrade.
water and passive-aggressive rinsing. There's
You remember
also
the
a
village
priest sitting
festival
in the
last
far
spring,
corner, looking
when a traveling
uncomfortable.
merchant
The church
sold
has
hair
become
oil
frowning
made
on
from
public
goose
bathing
fat
that
and
claims
herbs.
tempts people into sinful
It promised freedom
You're not
from
sure if they mean
crawling
nudity or
shame.
gossip. Probably
You scraped
both.
together 2
This
coins
story
and bought a
has
vial.
demonstrated how widespread
It worked for
bathhouses
3
were
whole
after the
days, then
14th
turned
century.
rancid in the
Some say
sun.
they declined due to fears
You had
of
to shave your
deceit.
sideburns to
Others
stop
blame
attracting
changing religious
dogs.
views on
Still,
modesty and temptation.
there's something
Either way,
therapeutic about letting
fewer
someone
people
else
wanna
comb your
sit
hair.
naked next to strangers. Time
It's
goes
intimate,
on. But for now,
oddly calming, like
you're
scratching an itch
sold
that's
back.
older than
In
memory.
some towns, bathhouses served
As the
food and
session
drink.
ends,
You could bathe
your
and
sister
sip
holds up the
ale at
comb for
same
inspection.
time. A very damn
4
dinner.
lice, a
Dave
couple of eggs,
briefly considered
and what might
asking
be
the
part of a
apprentice to
breadcrumb.
Tubbs over to pass the bread.
You're
He's
good for
sick.
now,
He's also
she
picking
announces,
something out of his ear.
proud.
You reconsider.
You thank her
You
and
grab
go
your
about your day.
comb and start on your hair,
But the itching returns by
working slowly
nightfall.
through the tangles.
It's like your
Steam
scalp has a
loosens the
schedule,
knots, and for a
and it
moment,
knows when
you
you're
feel
vulnerable.
halfway human. Even your
That night,
fingernails look less alarming.
You sit by the hearth with your head tilted, watching embers drift upward like lazy fireflies. You scratch absent-mindedly, half asleep, and think about hair. You think about nobles with braids dusted and crushed pearls. You think about monks with bald tonsures and itchy robes. You think about lice who are probably composing love songs in your bangs. Your cousin once claimed his lice whispered secrets. You rolled your eyes. Then he guessed what you ate for lunch. You haven't made eye contact with him since. Tomorrow, maybe you'll try the vinegar rinse again, or ash, or shave a little. Or just keep combing. Because in this world, clean isn't a finish line, it's a daily, itchy, mildly comedic battle. And honestly, you're getting pretty good at it. The bathhouse smells like wet wood, boiled herbs, and regret. You're not even inside yet. You're still standing in the muddy lane, holding a bundle of tattered linen, second guessing whether this trip is worth the effort, but your armpits say yes, loudly. So you step through the crooked doorway and into the steam. Town bathhouses are rare, and you're lucky to live near one. Built from timber and stone, with a leaky roof and windows made of oiled parchment, it's a shared space for the brave, the filthy, and the socially curious. Peasants, merchants, travelers, and the occasional minor noble all converge here to stew in warmth and awkward eye contact. Inside, the air clings to your skin like soup. A fire burns beneath a copper boiler, bubbling water that's later mixed with cold to avoid scalding anyone important. Wooden tubs line the walls, some private, most not. Curtains flap like sad flags of modesty. You pick a tub in the corner and claim it with a towel and an aggressive stare. Bathhouses are a mix of hygiene and gossip. You hear everything here: who's stolen whose goose, who's sleeping with the miller's wife, and why the blacksmith's apprentice now limps. You also hear a lot of coughing, splashing, and the occasional sneeze into like elbow-length bathwater. You settle into your tub slowly, hissing as the heat hits your skin. Your toes curl, your shoulders drop. You haven't been this warm since the hay fire of 28. The person next to you sneezes. You pretend not to notice. They pretend not to care. It's a social contract sealed by steam. You pull out a rag and start to scrub. First your arms, then your neck, then the part of your back you can reach if you twist like a desperate worm. You soap up if you're lucky enough to have real soap and rinse off using a ladle of warm water poured reverently over your head. It feels like a baptism. Only instead of saving your soul, you're just washing 3 weeks of goat sweat off your skin. Bathhouses used to be everywhere in towns across medieval Europe, especially during the earlier Middle Ages. But as time went on, public bathing became controversial. Why? Because you're not just here to get clean. You're here for the drama. You listen as two older women argue in the next tub over something about a stolen pie. Or maybe a stolen fiancé. Hard to tell under the sound of sloshing water and passive-aggressive rinsing. There's also a priest sitting in the far corner, looking uncomfortable. The church has begun frowning on public bathing lately, claims it tempts people into sinful behavior. You're not sure if they mean nudity or gossip. Probably both. Historians still debate how widespread bathhouses were after the 14th century. Some say they declined due to fears of disease. Others blame changing religious views on modesty and temptation. Either way, fewer people want to sit naked next to strangers as time goes on. But for now, you soak. Odd fact in some towns, bathhouses served food and drinks. You could bathe and sip ale at the same time. A very damp dinner date. You briefly consider asking the apprentice 2 tubs over to pass the bread. He's cute. He's also picking something out of his ear. You reconsider. You grab your comb and start on your hair, working slowly through the tangles. Steam loosens the knots, and for a moment, you feel halfway human. Even your fingernails look less alarming. The woman across from you offers a sprig of mint to chew. Freshens the breath, she says, and makes your sweat smell less like despair. You thank her and bite down. It's bitter. But she's right. It does help. By the time you step out, wrinkled and flushed, you feel reborn. Cleaner, warmer, slightly less like you live with livestock. You towel off behind a curtain that covers absolutely nothing. Your modesty has long since fled the scene. You dress in linen that only smells slightly like damp cheese and tie your hair back with a ribbon that may or may not have belonged to your cousin's goat. As you step out into the cool air, the bathhouse door creaks closed behind you. The world feels sharper now. The mud is still there. The air still thick with manure and chimney smoke, but for a few hours, you were clean. Ish. Later that evening, as you huddle by the hearth, someone makes a joke about looking too fancy to be a peasant. You smile a little, then scratch your ear. Clean never lasts, but you've had your moment. And in this world that's more than most, you wake up with something fuzzy in your mouth. For one glorious second, you hope it's a dream. Then you realize it's your tongue, dry, coated, and tasting like you licked the inside of a barley sack. You grunt, sit up, and smack your lips a few times like that'll magically fix anything. It doesn't. Your breath could knock over a cow. There's no such thing as mint toothpaste or whitening strips in your world. You grab the nearest thing to a toothbrush, a thin twig from a birch tree, chewed on one end until it fans out like a tiny broom. It's called a tooth twig. It's natural. It's simple. It's also kind of gross. Still, you chew and scrub, spitting little bits of wood into a bucket.
You're heading to
It doesn't
market,
taste good,
not to sell nothing finishes
but
ready
it tastes
yet, but
better than your mouth
see if
did
you
5
can
minutes
trade
ago.
Or beg, or both.
You add a
You've got
pinch of
chipped
salt if you're
spoon
feeling
and a small
fancy,
coin from the boy
a dash
earlier.
of
It
vinegar
isn't
if you're
much,
feeling
but it's
daring.
more than you had yesterday.
Some
The
people
market
swear
isn't
by sage or
bustling.
fennel.
Not yet.
Others just
a few
give up and
static
hope
figures
no one
wrapped in
notices.
cloaks. Each one moving with the
You-
slowness of someone who didn't sleep
you
well.
care.
You nod at an old woman
At
stirring a
least
pot
you
that
care
smells
enough
like
not to
turnips
make
and
someone
vengeance.
faint when you say
Doesn't
good
smile
morning.
back. That's
You glance
normal.
across the room
You
at your
approach the man
grandfather,
selling cheese
already
or
dipping his twig in
something,
honey.
trying to impersonate
For the ladies,
cheese.
he says with a
You pick
wink,
up a wedge.
you do not want to know what
Soft
that
in the
means.
middle, hard at the edge.
Historians still
Smells
debate
like
how
it's
much
considering
medieval
violence.
peasants
You smoke and
prioritized
don't
dental
sniff.
hygiene.
How much?
Some argue they
You ask
chewed
me.
aromatic
How's your
herbs and
spoon?
wiped their teeth with
That
cloths.
and the coin?
Others
You
believe they
hesitate.
simply
It's just a
accepted tooth
spoon,
loss
just
as a
a
natural
coin.
part of
But
life
that's
like
also
aging,
tomorrow.
or
later today if
taxes,
things go wrong.
or goats
Still,
chewing on
daughter
your
hasn't
shoes.
tasted cheese
You
in
finish your
weeks.
cleaning routine
You
with a
trade.
quick rinse
He
from a
grunts
clay cup of
approval
water.
and wraps the wedge in a
You
scrap of
swirl it,
cloth that used to
spit
be
it out
part
the
of a
door,
shirt. You nod
and
thanks
accidentally
slide it
hit the
into your
goose.
satchel like it's treasure witch.
Again,
It is. You tell
you
yourself
mumble an
you'll save
apology.
it. Maybe for lunch.
The
Maybe
goose
for her
hisses.
birthday. Maybe
You
for when
retreat.
someone cries. You wander the
Your cousin
stall.
brags that he's never had a tooth fall out,
Most are crates
even though
full
you
of
saw him
blankets
lose
laid out
one
with
last
bundles
spring
of wild
biting into
garlic,
undercooked
lumps
eel.
of black bread, or
He
buckets
claimed it
of
was
dried
loose anyway.
peas. One man
You let him
sells
have the win.
pickled something.
Odd
Doesn't
fact.
say what. You
Some
pass the
medieval
church
people
on the way
believed
back,
worms caused
not because
toothaches,
you're feeling
not
particularly
figuratively
holy,
literal
but
tiny
because it's
worms
warmer
burrowing
than
in your gums.
outside. The doors are
There were
open.
even cures for it,
Smoke from a censer
involving
curling through
incense
the air
smoke
like a
blown into
lazy
your mouth to
sermon.
coax the
You
worms out.
slip inside for a moment.
You picture
Feel the
this,
stillness
wrinkle your
wrap around
nose,
you like
and
an
decide to
old
stick
shawl.
with your twig.
There's no one in the pews. Just
Food
the
doesn't
faint
help your
creak of
situation.
wood and the lingering
You eat a
smell
lot of coarse
wax,
bread,
wine, and secret.
root
You sit for a
vegetables,
moment.
and
Not
dried
to
meat.
pray, not quite.
Nothing screams
Just to
gentle
sit.
on
You
enamel.
stare at the icon of a saint
And
whose
forget
name
about
you
sugar
never
unless you're
learned.
sneaking
He
a bit of
looks
honey or
tired.
snagging an
His
apple
eyes
from the
say
orchard.
he has heard enough
When you
confessions
do
and
get
dosing
sugar,
teenage yours to top
it's
off
a
the week.
celebration
You wonder if he was a
and a
potter
dental
once,
crisis.
or hungry.
Once, you heard of a
Real.
noblewoman
You
who
know,
cleaned her
stay
teeth with
long.
crushed pearls?
Outside, the sun's finally
You
dragging
wonder
itself
if she
into
ever
the sky
chipped a
like it owes
molar and didn't
someone
tell
rent.
anyone out of
Clouds pull
embarrassment.
back reluctantly, revealing
Today,
the winter sky.
breakfast is onion soup with bits of stale bread tossed
Air
in.
doesn't warm. It
The
doesn't
flavor is
matter. You head home.
assertive.
On the way you pass,
The aftertaste
three boys
even more
throwing
so.
rocks at a frozen puddle.
You make
One
a
of them
mental
slips
note
and
to find
falls.
some
The
parsley to
others
chew
laugh.
later,
You don't stop them.
or
You're not
charcoal,
the
or both.
constable. You're not
As you
even a
eat, you
father to
notice your
any of
youngest
them.
brother
But
trying to
still,
wiggle his
for a
front
second,
tooth with his
you
tongue.
imagine telling them to stop. Then you
It's
imagine
ready,
getting
he
hit
says
with a rock
proudly.
for the trouble. You keep
I'm gonna
walking.
pull it out with
A car
string and a
creaks
rock.
past. The driver nods.
You nod
His
solemnly,
horse looks
as
worse
if
than
this is
your
normal.
boots. It wheezes with every step.
Because it
Steam
is.
puffing from its nose like it's practicing
You
to be a
remember your
dragon.
own
You
tooth-pulling
wonder
experience.
If you could trade for the manure,
It involved a
use it for the
rooster,
garden,
a
or
distraction,
eat, or just
and
to
your
remember
aunt
what
yelling,
horses smell like at
"Now it
home."
worked."
The door groans again.
Sort of.
Fires low, but not dead.
You
Your
still have a
wife
small
is
scar
awake
from where you
now,
ran into the fence
kneeling by the
afterward.
hearth, stirring
Toothaches are
something
feared in the
pot.
village.
You can smell
They're the kind of pain that
parsnips
makes grown men cry and old women mutter curses. When they strike, people turn to strange remedies, boiled herbs, clove oil, prayers, or letting the village healer poke your gum with a silver needle to let the bad air out.
Your daughter has drawn shapes in the
You once
ash
saw
by the
someone
hump.
try to
One
numb a
looks like
toothache with
star.
ale,
One looks like
then
a goat.
more ale,
One might be you.
then passed
You
out in a
tousle
puddle,
her hair and sit down
which,
beside
to
her.
be
The
fair,
floor is still
did
cold,
stop the
but your
pain.
bones have adjusted.
Temporarily,
Lunch will come.
you finish your
Maybe
meal and
not
check your
soon,
reflection in the
but
well
maybe
water.
soon enough.
Your teeth
You
are
lean
still
back
mostly
eyes
there,
on the fire.
a little
Your
yellow,
stomach growls
a
again,
little
and
uneven,
this time, you
but
don't
strong enough to
shush
bite a
it.
carrot.
You let it speak. It's
For
hot,
now.
right? The house smells better
Later
than
in the
it
day,
has in days. The parsnip
you help
is
repair a
boiling with
fence,
softness,
chewing on a sprig of
sweetness,
mint as you
ease
work.
in the air. There's even
It helps a
sprig of
bit.
something green in
A
the
girl passes
background,
by and
maybe.
compliments your
Or
breath.
one of the misery herbs
You
your
beam like a
neighbor's
freshly
small,
cleaned
worn-off
molar.
coffin husband. You don't
Then
care
she
what it
adds,
does, as long as it doesn't
"Better
taste
than
like
last week."
despair.
You take it as a
crouch by the
win.
fire, watching the bubbles rise.
That night, you use your tooth twig again. You've worn the end down to a sad little fuzz, but it still gets the job done. Sort of. You hum a little tune while you scrub, just to distract from the taste. As you spit into the fire pit, the embers hiss. You watch the smoke rise and think, maybe someday, someone will invent a way to clean teeth without twigs and wishful thinking. But for now, this is enough. You're lying on your back, staring at the low rafters of the hut, listening to the drip, drip, drip of melting frost outside. It's winter now, and not just chilly. It's soul-snatching cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones, curls up in your joints, and stays there like a bitter ex you never officially broke up with. This is the season when peasants debate one simple question to bathe, or to stay alive. Bathing in winter is like challenging death to a staring contest. The water is freezing, the wind is sharp, and your hut has the insulation of a damp biscuit. You haven't undressed completely in over 2 weeks, not because you're modest, but because you physically can't. Your tunic has fused to your skin somewhere between Christmas and now. You managed to peel it off today, which is both a victory and a deeply unpleasant experience. The smell is layered like onions. If the onions lived in a pigsty, you eye the wash basin in the corner. It's full of ice. Try to poke a hole in the surface with a stick. It doesn't work. You finally stab it with a knife and break through, sending shards clattering to the floor like some medieval spa horror movie. You dip your hands into the slush. Your fingers scream. You pull them back immediately and whisper an apology to yourself. Historians still debate how often medieval peasants bathed in winter. Some say once a week was ideal. Others argue it dropped to once a month, if that, during the colder seasons. And when you consider the logistics, it makes sense. Heating enough water to bathe required hours of firewood collecting, constant tending, and an unholy amount of yelling at people to stop opening the door. Odd fact. Some households believed bathing in winter would open the pores and let in death. Not metaphorical death, literal, cloak-wearing, scythe-carrying death. You're not saying you believe it, but you're also not exactly stripping down in a snowstorm to prove a point. Instead, you go for the strategic splash method. You heat a pot of water over the hearth until it's merely lukewarm instead of boiling. Your sin's off hot. You dip a cloth into it and start dabbing. Face, armpits, neck. The general vicinity of personal areas, no need to get heroic. The cloth steams when it touches your skin. It's the nicest thing that's happened to you in days. You scrub behind your ears and under your arms, where a strange cheese-like smell has taken up residence. The soap you're using is a soft lump made from tallow and lye. It's gritty and faintly smells of beef. You pretend it's lavender. You are a winter prince, well, a very cold, very itchy winter prince. After dabbing your limbs, you toss on 3 layers of wool and pray they hold in the heat. You shuffle to the fire, hugging yourself like a freezing squirrel. At least your feet are warm. They've been next to the embers since dawn. You think back to warmer months when you could bathe in the stream. You miss it. You also don't miss stepping on frogs or being stared at by geese. But honestly, you take the amphibians over this frostbite any minute feeling. Outside, someone yells that it's snowing. You open the door a crack.
Maybe
Yep.
for nothing. You pause at the
Thick
hearth,
flakes.
staring into the
Soft
coals.
and silent.
They pulse red and orange.
Beautiful.
Like
If
tiny
you're not
hearts
planning on
refusing
bathing
to
in
quit.
them,
You think of your father's funeral
your mother
pyre.
tosses
How
a pot of
the
hot
flames
water
swallowed
onto the
his
frozen
body,
path,
but not the
where it
stories he
instantly
told.
turns
You
to
try to
steam and
remember one of them
disappears.
now. Something about a goat
See, she
and a
mutters.
hat and a
Witches in
priest
the
who
wind.
wasn't actually
You
a
don't
priest.
ask.
You smile
You just
again.
nod.
Small, quiet.
Winter brings out the
You turn
weird in
back
everyone.
toward the shelf,
Later,
eyeing the cheese.
you visit the neighbor
Just for a
who claims
second,
he's
then you
found a
turn
new
away.
way to bathe
Not
using smoke.
yet. The fire's
He throws
down to a
mugwort and
lazy
juniper onto the
flicker now.
fire and
Just
sits in a
enough to
blanket
keep
tent
the
over the
pot from
hearth.
soaking into cold
He smells like an
silence.
herbal
Your
barbecue.
daughter has gone
You
quiet
try it,
outside.
you sweat,
hear the soft
you
scrape of a
cough,
stick across frost of
you may be
dirt.
cleaner,
Maybe drawing
or just
circles.
roasted.
Maybe playing queen of the chickens again.
Some people rub themselves with
You let her
snow.
be her world.
You tried it
Though
once,
small,
your soul
still
almost
has
left your
space
body.
for pretend.
By the time you
Yours
crawl
lost
into
that
your
somewhere
pile of
between
blankets
your
at
first
night,
toothache and your
you've
second
stopped
winter
worrying
without
about
turning.
cleanliness.
Your wife finishes sweeping and
You
stands
just
still
want to
for a
retain
moment,
core
broom in
warmth.
one hand, staring
You
out
pull
the
a wool
small
cap
window
over your
pegged to
ears,
the wall.
bury your
The
face
view
in
isn't
straw,
much, mostly
and try
mud
not to
and
think about the
fence
layer
and
of
two
grime
goats that
slowly
hate each other
becoming
on a
part of your
spiritual level.
personality.
Still, she stares. And
The
you know
wind
what she's
whistles
doing?
through the cracks
She's
in the wall.
counting what you have left.
You hear the
Say
occasional
that
snore
you-
from your
do you
father and the
think the
quiet
reef will come
choo-choo-choo
today?
of mice near
She
the grain
asks.
sack.
You shake your head. He was here
It's
2
not
days
peaceful,
ago.
exactly,
Took
but
half
it's
the eggs.
normal.
We didn't
You scratch
have-
your shoulder.
She nods slowly.
You
as
smell
if hoping
faintly of
the memory
smoke,
changes with movement.
meat,
You sit
and
back
regret.
down, cross afternoon
But you're
is here
alive.
not that it looks different
Unbathed.
from morning. Same
But
color
alive.
sky, same cologram.
And hey, you
Same
didn't
aches
die
in
of
your
opened
joints.
pores.
Just
Yet.
that position. You take the spoon,
You
wiggle
can hear it
past
before you see
winter and
it.
start smoothing its
Women
handle again.
laughing,
It doesn't need
children
smoothing, but
squealing,
your hands need
and the
doing. You think
unmistakable
about
sound
what
of
else there is
fabric
to
being
eat.
slapped
There's a
against
small
river
cloth
rocks.
sack of oats in the corner.
It's
Hidden
laundry
beneath a
day,
stack of firewood no
and
one
for a
wants to touch
medieval
because
peasant,
spiders. You did
that
the
means
math in
one
your
thing:
head
group
already this
survival mode,
morning.
with a
Not
side
enough
of
for
frozen
porridge?
fingers
Well,
and
maybe enough for
unsolicited
porridge,
life
like
advice.
porridge is sad.
You trudge down the
Ornery
muddy
cousin who
path
always
toward the
brings up
stream.
politics at dinner. You
A
could
sack
go
of linen
foraging,
slung over your
but
shoulder
it's
and a
not
growing
quite
sense of
spring.
dread in your
Not
gut.
yet. The
You're
nettles
not
haven't
dreading the
dared
labor.
poke through the frost.
Exactly.
The dandelions are still asleep.
You're dreading the river.
Wild garlic is playing
It's
hard to
spring
get.
runoff
You
season,
once tried boiling
which means the
water.
water's flowing
Once
fast,
you lie back on the
cold,
floor. It's not
and full of
comfortable.
mystery
That's the
debris.
point. If you get too
Last week, someone
comfortable,
found half a
you won't
shoe
get
in
up
what
again.
might have been a
That's the
goat's
danger.
tooth.
In warmth, in
When you
stillness,
arrive,
in
the
pretending
gang's already there.
stop, you hear the
Your
low
aunt has
rumble of a
commandeered the
cart
best rock
down the
flat.
path. Not close,
Wide
just enough to
and not
remind you
covered
the
in
world keeps
moss.
moving, even when you don't.
She
Your
nods at you
wife
like a
sits
general
beside
preparing for
you,
battle.
pulling at a loose thread
You're
in
late.
her sleeve. It's
The
a
water's
bad
already
habit,
bitten me
but
twice.
You never stop
You
to
set your
bat
bundle
sleeve
down
big
and begin the
patch
ritual.
So many times it's
Step
more
1,
memory than
unroll your
fabric.
linen
I
tunics,
dreamed of apples
undershirts,
last night, she said.
and the mystery
You
sock
don't
no one
reply.
admits
Not
to
because
owning.
you don't care, but because you
Step
did
2,
too.
soak them in the bucket
Instead,
you filled
you
upstream.
say, green or
Step 3,
red.
attack
She
them with
smiles.
soapwort and raw
Barely red,
determination.
big, with that crunch. You
Soapwort
exhale
is a
through your
miracle
nose.
plant, at
Liar.
least.
Red ones go
That's what
soft
the old
by
herbalist
spring.
claims.
She leans her head
You
against
crush
his
its
shoulder.
leaves into a
It's the warmest
slimy
thing you
lather and
felt
rub
all
it into the
day.
fabric.
Your daughter comes back
It smells
inside,
earthy,
cheeks flushed,
fresh,
hands full of mud
and
mystery.
slightly like
I
wet
found
radish.
something, she declares.
It won't
She
kill
holds
lice,
up
but it'll
a
make your
rock,
clothes
not
feel
a
less like
magic
they've been
rock,
slept
not
in by a
shiny
small
one.
family of
Just a
hedgehogs.
rock by the way
You
she
scrub
holds
each
it.
garment
You'd
against
think
the
it
stone
cured
until your
fever
knuckles
and
turn
make
red.
trees from air. You
Your
take it,
cousin drops her
examine it
shift
like a
and
scholar.
shrieks.
Nod gravely.
Leech.
This, you say, is a
Everyone
very
panics for a
important
moment.
rock. She beats.
Then someone
You
makes a
hand it
joke
back like
about
you
medieval
returned a relic
leech
to its
therapy,
rightful
and you
owner.
all
She puts
pretend
it
it's
in her pocket
fine.
and runs to show it to the goat, who
Odd
looks
fact, Laundry Day wasn't
then
just about
mildly
cleaning, it
alarmed.
was community
Then in
news
different,
hour.
You stretch again.
This
The
is where
bulls
gossip
protest
lives,
louder this time.
thrives,
You know
and
you'll need to
multiplies.
chop more wood soon.
You
tell
learn that
yourself
Marta's
you'll do
goat
it
is
after the
pregnant,
sun moves.
that the miller's
Which is
son has
code
been
for,
sneaking out after
I
dark,
feel like I might
and
die
that
from
old
gift
Gilda
first.
has been hoarding
You stand
lavender.
anyway, because
You
that's
keep
the
that
thing
one filed away. Lavender makes everything better. Historians still debate how frequently peasants wash their clothes. Some say weekly, some say monthly. Others think it depended on the weather and whether your shirt could stand up on its own. What's certain is that it was a labor-intensive affair that took all day and then some. You pause to wring out a tunic. The water runs brown at first, then clearer. It's satisfying in a deeply primal way. Like watching your sins soak out of your sleeves, a duck waddles by, giving you a look that can only be described as judgmental. You stare back. This is your rock now, your territory. Your younger brother starts splashing nearby and gets scolded by 3 separate women. He slinks away to sulk under a tree, where he'll likely try to fish with a stick again. You let him. He caught a boot once. That counts. Halfway through the pile, your fingers go numb. Your breath steams in the cool air. You smack your hands together to bring the feeling back. And someone offers you a swig of weak beer. It's flat, warm, and perfect. You catch yourself smiling as that, for all the misery, there's a rhythm to this task. Soak, scrub, rinse, wring, repeat, talk a little, sing badly, laugh when someone slips on moss and blames the river spirits. They always do. You remember your mother's rule. If it still smells like feet after rinsing, wash it again. If it smells like other things, burn it. Once everything is washed, you lay the linens on flat stones and bushes to dry. The sun has finally peeked out, and steam rises from the fabric like the ghosts of poor hygiene past. You sit back, hands aching, and admire your work. The tunics are still stained. Of course they are, and medieval soap is not a miracle, but they're cleaner, lighter, and smell faintly of river and effort. You'll take it. As the day winds down, you help fold the dryer pieces. A pair of small breeches is missing, probably floated away or been claimed by the duck. Either way, it's someone else's problem now. You bundle everything into the sack and sling it over your shoulder. It's heavier now, somehow. Waterlogged. Maybe. Or maybe just full of pride. Peasant laundry isn't glamorous, but it is earned. You walk home with wet hems slapping your ankles and the scent of soapwort clinging to your sleeves. You feel tired, but clean. Well, clean adjacent. By nightfall, the linens hang in the hut, gently steaming near the hearth. You pull a shirt over your head and inhale. Still smells faintly of damp, but also of river breeze and resilience. Not bad for a day's work. It hits you the second you walk inside that dense, heavy scent that never quite leaves. It's the smell of your life of sweat, firewood, boiled onions, and just a whisper of wet dog. You've stopped noticing it most day, but when you do notice, whew, you smell like a church candle. Not the fancy, perfumed ones lit at feasts, no. No. The everyday ones. The cheap tallow kind, made from rendered animal fat and burnt with all the subtlety of a slap to the nose. That smell, it clings to you. Your clothes, your skin, your soul. And it's not even the worst one. Today, you've been helping your neighbor render pig fat to make candles and soap, which sounds industrious and hygienic until you realize it means standing over a bubbling cauldron of semi-liquefied pork, while flies buzz around like it's a buffet. You stir the pot, swatting at insects. trying not to inhale too deeply. Every time the fat bubbles, it spits like it's offended. A blob lands on your boot. You decide to burn those boots later. It's the only logical option. Smells holy. Your neighbor jokes, gagging slightly. Like Saint Bacon of the scented flame. You laugh through your sleeve. Odd fact, peasants believed the smell of tallow was protective. Some thought it kept away evil spirits, or at least nosy neighbors. And during the Black Death, people stuffed their clothes with herbs or burned strongly scented things just to mask the stench of sickness. Historians still debate whether these smells helped slow disease or just made people slightly more tolerable to be around. Either way, it wasn't working miracles.
You don't have to lie.
After candle duty, you help your aunt smoke meat over a fire pit. The entire hut is filled with a haze of hickory and lamb fat. You can barely see. Your eyes sting. And your clothes absorb every molecule of smoke like a wool sponge. And the kicker, it's intentional, because under all this, there's a logic smoke. Survival.
So before you get comfortable,
your family burns nearly everything: wood, straw, dung if necessary, just to keep warm. And all that smoke curls up into your ceiling, your clothing, your lungs. You cough, you wheeze, but hey, you're warm. The smoke also drives off fleas. Mostly. You haven't been bitten in 2 days, and that counts as a win. You toss another log onto the fire and sit down by the hearth, slowly rotating your tunic like a rotisserie chicken. It dries in patches, sending out waves of onion, wool, and faint barnyard funk. You breathe it in like a good soup. Because honestly, you've started to associate this smell with home. Later, you try to freshen up with some dried rosemary rubbed under your arms. It works for 5 whole minutes before you're back to tallow sweat shuck. Your cousin offers a solution: mash up mint leaves and rub them on your feet. It'll confuse the smell, he says. You try it. Your feet smell like confused mint and something swampy. You're not convinced. You think about those strange nobles who wear rosewater and lemon oil. The merchant once described a woman whose bath was filled with milk and honey. You imagine it soaking in sweetness, surrounded by rose petals, sipping from a golden cup. Then your little brother runs by and throws a chicken at you. Back to reality. That night, as you climb into your itchy, straw-filled bed, you realize your blanket smells like everything you did today. Tallow, smoke, herbs, a dash of pig panic. Oddly, it's comforting. It's yours. A personal aroma of peasantry. You've learned to live with it. In some strange way, it's a layer of protection. A scent-based shield against the cold, the fleas, and the judgment of those who think bathing more than once a season makes them fancy. You sniff your sleeve, shrug, could be worse. You fall asleep to the scent of meat smoke, candle grease, and a hint of rosemary. It's not Chanel, but it is authentic. And in your world, that's what counts. You're sitting on a bench near the edge of the village square, chewing absent-mindedly on a stem of parsley, not because you're hungry, but because someone told you it might make your breath smell less like sadness and turnips. You're not sure if it works, but it gives your mouth something to do. A woman walks by. She lifts her apron to her nose discreetly. Not because of you, but near you. You wonder,
But no
Because
one's done
here's the
anything
thing you've
about it
learned in your
either.
peasant life, Odor, is social
Important,
currency.
but is it ghosts
Not
who's
wealth,
important?
not beauty,
Historians still
not even
debate
literacy.
whether peasant communities
It's
actively
how you
understood
smell that
water
really
contamination
defines your
or just
status, whether you're
accepted
invited to the
stomach cramps
feast
as part of
table
the
or
deal.
told to
Use
stand downwind of it.
Wipe your
And in
mouth
medieval
on your
times,
sleeve
your
and
nose knows
prepare for the
everything.
real morning ritual.
There's a
Brushing
clear
your teeth.
hierarchy to
You
smells
chew
in your
on a birch
village.
twig until it
The Lord
frees.
smells like
Then use
cloves
it
and
to
leather.
scrub at the worst of the
The
grind.
steward like
Your
ink and
cousin
stale
swears
wine.
by this.
The priest like incense and judgment.
You personally think
But
it just
you-
makes you smell like wet stick.
You smell
But
like
hay
goat,
nectar done fermented
garlic,
rich stew. Now that your
and
face is
good
sort of washed
intentions.
and your mouth is
It's not your
refreshed,
fault.
you return to the hut
You sleep
to
near
change
animals,
into your outer clothes.
cook over
They've
open
been
fire,
hanging
and
by the
wash your
hearth to
clothes by
dry,
hand in a
which
stream
in
where
peasant
ducks
terms
bathe with
means
zero
absorb
shame.
more smoke. They're warm.
Your home smells
Yeah.
like
But
smoke,
they also make
damp
you smell
straw,
like a campfire
and
that
occasionally
someone tried to
triumph
cook
if the bread
onions
didn't
on.
burn.
As you step back outside, the neighbors
But
fear
social
the
interaction,
goat that escaped his pen.
that's where
One of
things
them
get
is
tricky.
barefoot, squealing
If you're
with
going to a
laughter.
feast,
Can't remember the last
or
time
even
you were that
standing near
carefree.
someone
Probably
mildly
before you
important,
knew what ringworm was,
you do what
or before
everyone
you
does
realized that the
smell
only thing
camouflage.
separating your sleeping
You
area
crush
from the
sage or
chimney
mint
is a
into your
pile of
armpits.
firewood in
You
denial.
chew licorice root.
Stretch your arms and
If you're
breathe
lucky,
in the scent
you
of
rub a dab of
manure,
rose oil on your
wool,
wrist.
and distant
Oil you
bread
traded
baking
3 eggs
fills
and a
your
secret
lungs.
for.
It's a terrible, glorious
Some people hang
symphony
scented
of
herbs around their
smell.
neck in little
And yet,
fabric pouches.
This is home.
Others keep
You,
scented
the
handkerchiefs
most
in their
boring
sleeves,
character in the most boring
lifting them
stories of
subtly to
all
their
street
noses
food,
like
are
medieval
somehow
introverts at
alive
a
in
garlic
world that's
convention.
endlessly strange.
Odd fact.
It's a dirty
During
world,
plague outbreaks,
but it's
people carried
yours.
pomanders,
And as
tiny
the sun
balls filled with
climbs higher,
spices to
and the
purify the
fields
air.
call your name,
Some were
you
ornate,
know that your day is
gold-plated
just
charms.
beginning.
Others
Just
were literal
maybe
bundles of
try
herbs
not to
stuffed into
step in
socks.
anything squishy this time.
Yours a
You
dried
step
orange
around
peel
the corner
filled
of
with
the hut,
thyme and
clutching
mystery
your wooden
seeds.
bowl like it's a security
It works,
blanket,
sort
but
of.
no amount of oatmeal
Or at least
clinging to
makes
the
you
rim
smell
is
like a
going to
weird
protect you from
salad.
what comes next. The
Historians still
bathroom
debate whether
situation,
medieval
or
people
more
actually
accurately,
believed
the
bad
total
smells
and
caused
spectacular
illness,
lack of one.
or were
If
just
you need
signs
to
of it.
relieve yourself during
The
daylight
miasma
hour,
theory
your
was
best
big bad
option is
air
to
was
spot
thought
behind
to
the
carry
brambles
disease.
out past the goat pen.
So if you smelled something
Find it,
awful,
sort of. Depends on
you
the
held your
goat's
breath,
mood, really.
muttered a
Sometimes
prayer,
he stares, judgingly.
and tried not
The
to
toilet,
inhale death.
if we can even
Today,
call it that, is just
you're
a
helping with
shallow
market
hole in the
setup.
ground.
So you go
dug it
full scent
yourself last
defense.
week. You
You wash your hands in vinegar water, chew another parsley stalk, and stuff your shirt with a few sprigs of lavender you borrowed from the manor garden.
At night,
If anyone asks, you'll claim it was growing wild.
which is deceptively
It
heavy
wasn't.
when full. You're not proud of it.
As you haul
Especially when it
baskets of
sloshes
turnips into
and your
position,
barefoot
you
catches
overhear
the
a
edge,
conversation
one
between
clumsy
2
moment,
traveling
and
merchants.
suddenly your
That
dignity
man
is
smelled
soaking
of
into the
boiled
floorboards.
cabbage and
You're
regret.
not the only one who
At least he
struggles
didn't
with
smell like the
whole
fishmonger
waste
in York.
situation. The entire village does.
You nod
Is a
quietly.
designated
You've
dumping
met that
area beyond
fishmonger.
the hedges.
Smell doesn't
A
just
pit,
shape
a
how others
stinking
treat
heap
you.
of refuse,
It
and a
changes how you
graveyard
see
of
the
old
world.
sandals lost to
You
bad
recognize
foot.
neighbors
People
by
toss
scent
shape
alone.
apart contents
You
that
know
are
old
born
Edric's
in
nearby
dust.
when you get a whiff of
Unless
sour
they're
beer
lazy,
and
then they
burnt
dump it out
flour.
the back window, which
You
is
know your
exactly
cousin's
why
been
you
baking
never
when you
walk
smell
behind
honey
old
and
Edric's
slightly
hut in the
charred
morning.
optimism.
Not unless you want a free, unwanted
And there are
rent.
certain smells you
Historians
long
still
for:
debate
warm
whether
bread,
peasants understood
clean
disease
wool,
transmission from waste.
fresh rain on
Some argue
dust.
they connected filth
You'd
with
bottle
illness
those if you could.
intuitively. Others say
Sell
it
them
was
in the
more
market
about
next to the
bad
dried eels and
smells
onion
affecting the
ropes.
soul than
But perhaps the
anything
strangest
microbial.
part is how
Whatever the
accustomed you
reason,
become to it all.
you know better than to drink from the stream
You
downhill
once
of the
walked through a
dumping pit.
butcher's
You learned
stall,
that the hard way after
slipped on
weeks long
entrails,
days of
and
the
didn't
belly
flinch at the
close, as
smell.
Granny called it. Speaking of
A
Granny,
visiting noble
she has
gagged.
opinions about your habits.
You shrugged.
youngins don't squat low enough.
To you, it was
She
just another
grumbles, chewing a
Tuesday.
sprig of
Even
fennel.
attraction
That's
is
why your
nose-driven
knees are
here.
weak and your crops don't thrive.
You've heard girls say,
Nod solemnly
"He smells
and
like
promised
pine
to
and
squat
oats,
like
I'd
the
marry him."
ancestors would have wanted. There's a
That's the
public
bar.
latrine over in the manor
You've
grounds,
also heard,
reserved mostly for
"He
the
smells like
steward
the
and
back
hut."
end
It's
of a wet
basically
mule.
plank with holes over a
That's
stream luxury by your standards.
not the
peasants
bar.
once asked for a communal version in the
You
village.
sniff your tunic
The Lord
and wonder
laughed
where you
and
fall on
raised
that
taxes.
spectrum.
Instead,
Later,
you make
at the
do.
tavern,
You've learned to
the
carry
smells are layered like an archaeological dig ale.
Under your nose when doing
Sweat,
your business in summer.
unwashed feet,
It helps.
smoke,
Sort of. But only if
Boiled
the wind
meat,
is on your side and the
more
flies
ale.
are feeling merciful.
It's somehow
Toilet
comforting.
paper. You wish
You lean
it's
back,
lost. If
sip
you're
from a chipped
lucky,
cup,
leave.
and inhale deeply.
If you're desperate,
It's bad, but it's your bad. You smile because despite all the odd odors, there's an honesty to medieval scent culture. Nothing is hidden. You smell like what you are, a survivor, a laborer, a part of the land. You can tell the baker from the shepherd without a single word. You know who's been near the dung heap. And when you curl into your straw mattress later that night, with your herb sachet tucked under your neck, you realize something, even though the world around you reeks. It also remembers. Smells linger, they tell stories, they carry your life. And tonight, your story smells faintly of mint, hope, and just a little too much vinegar. You're in the garden, pretending to weed, but really just eavesdropping. Two women are crouched nearby, whispering low and urgent. You catch fragments soaked in wine, ruined the bread. He fainted like a goat, but it's the phrase her time of the month that makes your ears perk up. Because in a world where people still debate whether washing too often can kill you, medieval menstruation is an Olympic-level challenge. If you're a woman in the 14th century, every month brings a familiar mix of cramps, discomfort, and a full-body panic about what cloth you can sacrifice. Pads don't exist, neither do tampons, wings, or discreet purse-sized options. You use what you have: rags, moss, bits of old linen, folded straw bundles if you're really unlucky. Today, your older sister is preparing for her cycle. She's boiling a handful of dried yarrow in a pot by the fire. It helps with pain, she mutters, though her face says it mostly just tastes like boiled weeds. Historians still debate the range of menstrual tools used by peasants. We know noble women sometimes had fine cloths, even belts to keep things in place. But for common folk, it was improvisation and determination, and maybe a little prayer. Odd fact. Some believed menstruating women could sour wine, kill bread dough, or ruin crops just by walking too close. One monk swore he saw butter curdle mid-churn when a menstruating woman entered the room. You laugh at that now, but also, you never chanced it with the butter. Privacy, of course, is a luxury. Your hut is shared with 4 people and 2 chickens. So when it's that time of the month, you work around it literally. You tuck rags into your undergarments, change them when you can, rinse them in cold water behind the hut, and hope no one notices. Your cousin once tried stuffing a cloth with sheep's wool for extra padding. It worked until it didn't. The resulting rash is still legendary. People sing about it when they've had too much ale. You offer to help your sister today, fetching herbs from the hedge and drawing warm water. She winces as she sits on the bench, but doesn't complain. No one really complains. They just deal quietly, stubbornly, like everything else in peasant life. You've heard rumors of women in cities using sponges soaked in vinegar. One traveler mentioned something about medicinal tampons. It sounded revolutionary. Also, terrifying. You're not about to stick vinegar anywhere sensitive. Thank you very much. You wonder what the men think happens. Probably nothing. Most of them act like bleeding is a myth, or worse, evidence of possession. Your neighbor once claimed a woman's monthly humors gave her the power to hex goats. You asked him if she hexed his hairline too. He hasn't spoken to you since. Still, the topic remains mostly hidden. You don't talk about it. You just fold your cloths, tuck them away, and keep moving. Laundry day becomes a bit more strategic. The rinse water turns pink. No one asks. During heavy days, you walk more carefully. You avoid the fields, if you can, and skip church entirely. Not because you feel unworthy, but because the priest gives long, suspicious glances when women shift in their seats. You'd rather not be exorcised mid-sermon. At night, you roll up extra straw beneath you to soak any leaks. It crackles when you shift, which makes sleeping about as restful as napping on a basket of dry twigs. But it's better than waking up to a stained mattress and your mother yelling about linen wastage. There's one bright spot: camaraderie. Your sister, your aunt, the neighbor girl, they all understand. You share tips, lend cloth, whisper remedies. There's solidarity in this shared discomfort. A quiet sisterhood formed over boiling herbs and shared eye rolls. Sometimes, you joke about building a red tent like the stories say they do in the East, just to get some peace and quiet. A week alone, your aunt once sighed, eyes dreamy. Heaven. Tonight, your sister sits by the fire with a hot stone tucked under her tunic, groaning softly. You hand her the last of the dried raspberry leaf tea, pat her shoulder, and light another candle. The smell of wax and boiled herbs fills the room. You fall asleep wondering if one day someone will invent something soft, clean, and private for this. Something better than moss and desperation. Until then, you fold your cloths, say a silent curse at the moon, and get on with it. Because even in the dirtiest century imaginable, life doesn't stop. Neither do you. You're hiding behind the barn, arms raised, sniffing your own armpit. It's not your proudest moment, but this is peasant life. And sometimes the biggest mystery of your day is whether your left pit smells more like onions or just wet sheep. Spoiler, it's both. You've been sweating since sunrise. That's not unusual. You sweat feeding animals. You sweat digging root vegetables. You sweat blinking too hard in July. And deodorant, unfortunately, hasn't made its grand historical debut. Instead, you rely on what every respectable medieval peasant does: homemade remedies and blind hope. Today's remedy comes courtesy of your neighbor, who insisted that rubbing goose fat under your arms locks the odor in. You gave it a try. All it locked in was shame. Now you're trying to cover it up with crushed mint, rosemary, and a prayer to Saint Smellus of Armpit. You stuff a sprig of thyme into your sleeve and keep moving. Historians still debate whether peasants truly tried to mask body odor on a regular basis or simply embraced it as a part of life. Some evidence suggests the use of herbal infusions for washing. Others believe people just hoped the church incense would cover their sins and their stench. You decide to lean into the herbal route. There's a patch of lavender growing near the manor wall. Technically, it's not yours. Technically, you just borrowed some. Technically, no one needs to know. You rub the petals into your wrists, then behind your ears. You smell like you got in a fight with a very polite flower shop and lost. Your cousin joins you, holding a pouch that smells aggressively herbal. "Want to know a secret?" he says, eyes darting, boiled nettles, strained, mixed with crushed sage, dab it behind the knees. Works everywhere. You're skeptical. Last time he gave you hygiene advice, you ended up with a beetle bite in a very private location. But you take the pouch anyway. You remember the old woman in the next village who claims garlic rubbed on the feet draws out bad humors? You tried it once. The garlic didn't do much. But no one came within 6 feet of you for 3 days. A miracle. Odd fact. Some folks believe that carrying a slice of raw onion in your pocket absorbed foul body vapors. You currently have 2. You figure at worst, they'll become lunch. Then there's the matter of your clothes. You can scrub your armpits all you want, but if your tunic smells like mildew and livestock, you're fighting a losing battle. So you turn to fumigation. You hang your tunic above the hearth for an hour while tossing herbs into the fire juniper, bay, thyme, and a mystery sprig that may be poison. The smoke curls up into the fabric, masking everything with a powerful woodland cremation aroma. You feel weirdly proud. Of course, there's always the social tricks. When someone walks by and you feel less than fresh, you just move downwind or lean away. Or classic maneuver, pretend you're sneezing and turn your head for a discreet sniff check. You've mastered it. Today, you're heading to the midsummer gathering. That means 3 things dancing, stew, and proximity. You don't want to be the person everyone avoids when the music starts. So you arm yourself with every trick in the book. Fresh linen, dried mint between your toes, a pinch of ashes rubbed into your scalp, weirdly effective, and a dried apple slice tied around your neck like a peasant cologne. It works, kind of. At the feast, no one recoils. A girl even compliments your foresty scent. You nearly propose on the spot. As the night goes on and the fire burns low, you sit with your friends, laughing, eating, and enjoying the rare feeling of social acceptability. You're not exactly fragrant, but you're not offensive. That's what you call a win. You return home late, a little tipsy, a little sweaty, and absolutely exhausted. You peel off your tunic and hang it by the door. You catch a whiff. Smoke, herbs, and a hint of onion. Not bad. Not bad at all. You fall into your straw bed, arms behind your head, letting the cool night air brush over your skin. Tomorrow, you might try the nettle brew, or maybe revisit that vinegar foot wash, or just rub more mint under your arms and call it innovation. Because in a world without deodorant sticks and citrus-scented roll-ons, you do what peasants do best. Adapt. Smell less awful. Survive another day. The old woman across the village square is sick again. Not a little sick. Writhing. Sweat dripping. Groaning like the devil's grabbing her soul, kind of sick. Her family says it started right after she bathed. You feel your stomach drop. Because you know the rumors. Everyone does. Bathing can kill you. It sounds absurd, should sound absurd. But in the medieval world, it makes a twisted kind of sense. People say warm water opens your pores and lets in bad air, the dreaded miasma. And if the air is foul, or worse, cursed, then congratulations, you just invited death in like a guest at a poorly planned dinner party. Today, as you heat water over the fire for a quick face rinse, Your grandmother tuts loudly.
Blacksmith's apprentice
Not too
nowadays.
hot,
You also hear a lot of
she
puffing,
warns.
splashing,
You don't want the
and
fevers finding a
occasional
way in.
sneeze into elbow-length bath. settle
You
into
nod,
your tub
even though you know
slowly,
this is
listening as
nonsense.
the heat hits your skin. Your
Mostly,
toes curve. Your shoulders
historians
drop.
still
You haven't
debate
been
whether
this
people
warm since
actually
the
avoided
Empire of
bathing for
28.
fear of
The
disease,
person next to you
or if the
sneezes.
decline
You
in
pretend
personal
not to
hygiene had
notice.
more to do
They
with
pretend
limited
not to care.
resources,
It's a
firewood,
social contract
soap,
sealed by steel.
time,
You
or
pull
just
out a rag
sheer
and start to
exhaustion
scrub
from
first
surviving
your
everything
arms,
else.
then your neck,
What's
then the
clear
part
is
of
that
your back you
suspicion
can reach.
surrounded
If
the
you
act of
twist
getting
like a
clean,
desperate worm,
and you feel it
you
yourself
suffer
now,
biff. You're
more than
reluctant enough
usual.
to have real soap and rinse off.
Because the
Bring a
last time
ladle
you
of
took a
warm
full
water
bath,
poured reverently over your head.
your
It
uncle got the
feels like a
chills and spent a week
baptism.
sweating and
Only
shouting
instead
at
of saving
invisible
your
birds.
soul, you're just washing 3
Coincidence,
weeks of goat
maybe.
sweat off your skin. Bathhouses
But your
used to be
mother made a
everywhere
sign
in
of the
towns
cross when you
across
mentioned
medieval
washing
Europe,
again the next
especially
morning.
during the early
So
and Middle
today,
Ages. But
you
as
play it
time
safe.
went on, public bathing
You heat just
became
enough water for a
controversial.
cloth soak.
Why? Because
No
you're
tub,
not just here to
no
get
full
clean.
immersion.
You're here for the drama.
Just some warm
You listen
dampness
as
to
2
scrape the
older
barn off
women
your
argue
arms.
in the next tub over. Something about
You
a
think back to
stolen
stories the
pie.
village healer
Or
once
maybe a
told
stolen
about
haunted teller
nobles
to the
who
sound of
bathed in
sloshing
milk
water
and
at
came down
Bachelor
with
Resurrection.
fevers.
There's also
That's
a
what
priest
happens when
sitting
you
in the
try to
far
smell like
corner,
heaven,
looking uncomfortable.
she said with
The
a
church has
cackle.
begun frowning on public
The
bathing,
angels
lately
get
claiming it
jealous.
tempts people into
Odd
sexual behavior.
fact.
You're not sure if they mean
In
nudity
some
or gossip.
places,
Probably
bathhouses were
both.
blamed for
Historians still
spreading the
debate how
plague.
widespread bathhouses
People
were after
believed the
14th
communal
century.
heat,
Some say
steam,
they declined due to
and
fears
close
of
quarters
disease.
allowed
Others
disease to
blame
jump
changing
from
religious
person to
views
person
on
like
modesty
gossip
and
in the
temptation.
market.
Either way,
Several
fewer
cities
people wanna
even
sit
shut down
naked
their
next to
public baths
strangers
entirely
time
during
goes on.
outbreaks.
But for now, your
You feel a
soul
little shiver
is
as you
relaxed.
rinse your
In some
feet.
towns,
Still,
bathhouses served food
some
and drink.
bathhouses
You
remained,
could
especially
bathe and
those
sip
tied to
ale at the
monastic
same
orders.
time. A very damn
But even
dinner.
monks got
Dave,
nervous.
you briefly consider asking
You
the
remember the
apprentice
story
to
of
toast
Brother
over the
Aldrich,
bastard bread.
who bathed
His
every
kidneys
Friday until
also
one
picking
week he
something
caught a
out of his
cold
ear.
and died.
You reconsider. You
Now
grab
people
your
say
comb
don't
and
get
start on
Aldrich
your
when someone
hair,
sneezes.
working slowly through the tangles.
Later that
Steam
day,
loosens the knot,
your friend
and for a
Thomas claims
moment,
that his
you
cousin in
feel
the next
halfway
village
human.
dropped dead
Even
after
your
soaking too
fingernails
long.
look less alarming.
His
The woman
pores
across
never
from you
closed.
offers a sprig of mint to
He
chew,
whispers,
freshens the breath,
eyes wide.
and makes your sweat
He
smell
just
less like despair. You thank
drained
him and
out.
bite down. It's
You
beer,
can't tell if he's
but she's
joking.
right. It does
You
help.
hope he's
By the
joking.
time you step
And
out,
yet,
wrinkled and flushed,
you hesitate
you
when
feel
someone offers you a
reborn,
bucket of hot
cleaner,
water.
warmer.
You picture those
Slightly less like
steam-soaked
you live with
bathhouses and the
livestock.
pale
You
faces of the
power
sick.
walk behind a curtain that
You think of
covers
the old woman
absolutely
still
nothing.
groaning across
Your
the square.
modesty has long since
You
fled
think of
the
your
sea.
uncle's
You
invisible
dress in linen
birds.
that only smells slightly
You
like
splash your
canned
face
cheese
quickly,
and your
then
hair
dry
wrapped
off with a scrap
ribbon
of cloth
may
that
or may
smells
not
like
have
sun and
belonged to your
smoke.
cousin as goat.
No
As you
frills,
step out into the cool air,
no
the
risks.
bathhouse door
That
creaks
night,
closed behind you.
as the fire
The
dies
world
low
feels
and your
sharper
siblings
now.
snore on the
mud is
floor,
still there.
you
The
lie
air
awake
still
scratching
thick
your
with
knee
manure
and
chimney
pondering the
smoke, but
terrifying
for a few hours,
possibility that
you were
bathing
clean.
is somehow too much of a good thing.
Later that evening, as
That
you
maybe
huddle by the
cleanliness is a
hearth, someone
luxury
makes
the
a
dead
joke
enjoy
about
more
looking
than the
too
living.
fancy to be a peasant. You smile a
Still,
little, then scratch
you know
your
deep
ear.
down it's not the
Clean
water that's the
never
enemy.
lasts. But you've had
It's
your
the fear,
moment.
the
And in this
uncertainty,
world, that's more
the
than
never-ending
most.
guessing game
The
of
pot is
medieval
warm
medicine.
now, but not full. You swirl
One
water
week,
around
you're
its
told
edges,
to
hoping
wash.
to coax flavor from
The
last night's
next,
ghost.
you're warned
But
it
really,
invites
it's a
spirits into
thin
your
broth
bones.
with dreams
You
of
curl up
being
tighter,
useful.
pulling your
Still,
blanket over your
you
head,
sip the
breathing in the
details.
familiar mix
If
of
not the
sweat,
taste, if you're
dust,
yonder,
and old
you're
wool.
not ULL. Find a barley
You'll
flake
wash
or
again
onion
tomorrow,
skin on a spoon.
carefully,
Don't complain. Complaints don't
quietly,
cook grain. The fire pops
half out of
inside
habit,
behind you as you
half
pull
in
on your
rebellion.
boots. They're
Because if
made of
bathing
stiff
can kill you,
leather,
then
the
so
kind
can
that
not
remembers
bathing.
the shape of your foot. But
And
forgets
either
to
way, you've
forgive
got
you
pigs
for
to
it.
feed in the
One
morning.
heel is
You're
cracked,
standing
stitched
outside the
last
manor
week
house,
with a thread made from
gaping at the
rabbits hit
tub.
you in
It's not
desperation.
just
You
any
stand
tub.
slowly,
It's a wooden giant, deep enough to drown in, lined with linen, and steaming with actual hot water scented faintly with rose petals. There are rose petals in the water, floating, like little royal ships sailing through luxury. You have never felt so filthy in your life. You're here delivering firewood. But what you've actually been given is a front row ticket to the high drama of how the rich people bathe. You already knew there was a difference. But now it feels like you live on another planet. The steward sees you staring. Back to your work. He grunts, but not before tossing another pinch of herbs into the bathwater with all the flair of a chef seasoning a stew. You turn away quickly, but the image is seared into your brain, the Lord's youngest daughter soaking in warmth and luxury while you still count washing your feet as a spiritual event. Cleanliness. You realize that isn't just about hygiene. It's about class. Historians have long noted that bathing became increasingly associated with wealth and privilege as the Middle Ages wore on. While peasants scraped together soap scraps and stood naked in rivers dodging eels, the upper class could afford private baths, perfumed oils, and soft cloth to dry with. And not just for comfort, for status. Clean skin meant you had servants. Clean clothes meant you didn't spend your life in the mud. Clean teeth meant you could afford to chew on fancy herbs instead of mystery meat. You, meanwhile, once brushed your teeth with ash and rainwater during a thunderstorm. It didn't work. You still taste lightning when it rains. Odd fact. The royal court in France had an official bath attendant whose entire job was to manage the royal wash schedule, prepare herbal infusions, and occasionally whisper encouraging words like, "Very clean." My lord, you're not even sure your own family would say that to you on your birthday. Later that evening, you're back home, crouched over your humble washtub. It leaks slightly. The water is lukewarm at best. The only herbs nearby are a bit of wilted parsley and something that might be moss. You pretend it's mint. You pretend you're a noble. For exactly 6 seconds, your soap is a rough lump of tallow that smells like bacon and despair. You rub it into your arms and try not to cry. You begin to wonder if being clean is becoming less of a necessity and more of a luxury. Something you do not because it's practical, but because it sets you apart. You've seen how people glance at the baker's wife when she shows up at Mass in a freshly scrubbed shift. There's envy in the air. Maybe even suspicion. Why is she so clean, someone always mutters. What's she hiding? Cleanliness isn't just rare, it's powerful. There's even a whisper going around that the Lord's son got a marriage proposal just because he smelled like cinnamon once. You smelled like cinnamon too once, but only because you spilled it, and then cried when you had to sweep it up. Your aunt remembers a time when bathing was more common. Before the last plague, before the church started talking about temptation and sin, every time someone mentioned hot water, they're afraid of nakedness, she says, scrubbing her elbow raw, as if shame makes you cleaner. You think she might be right. Still, even among your fellow peasants, the cleaner you are, the more suspicious you seem. If you don't smell like smoke and livestock, people wonder if you've gone soft. Or worse, if you've started getting ideas. So you keep it simple. You wash what you can, when you can, and you make peace with the dirt. Because in your world, dirt doesn't mean lazy. It means you're busy,
You hand it to
you're
him.
working,
He grins like he just bought the
you're
broom.
surviving.
And you tuck the coin away and think
The
about
nobles
whether
can
to
have their
spend it on
rose petal
salt or
baths
save
and
it.
perfumed
But when the
towels.
Lord raises the
You'll
great
take your
tax
cracked
again,
wash tub
which
and
he
calloused
will,
hands
he
any day.
always do.
Well, maybe not any
Turn
day.
back to the wheel.
Maybe just most.
More clay, more shape,
Because as you
more
settle
hope.
into your straw
Spinning in
bed later that
circles,
night,
the workshop
you catch the
still
faintest
smells
whiff
like
of
clay,
smoke and rosemary on your
ambition
skin.
that's mostly dried up.
And for
You
a
rub
moment,
your hands
just
clean
one
with a rag
moment,
that has been soaked
you
through
let
and
yourself
crusted
imagine
over
a world where
dozen
being
times.
clean isn't
Your
political.
fingernails are packed
It's
with
just
earth,
clean.
And there's a streak of mud across your cheek.
You're kneeling
You
in the
don't bother
dirt,
wiping off. What's
elbow
the
deep
point?
in cabbage,
The next lump of clay
and
will just add
weirdly
another one.
at
You step
peace.
outside into
Not
a
because
village
you're
that's
clean.
barely begun to move.
You're not.
A mist clings to the
Not
air.
because you've solved medieval hygiene.
Chickens strut without
Absolutely
purpose.
not.
Minimize your boots,
But because
as if
after
it knows you're
everything
just a
after
few
smoke
rungs above
baths,
it on the food
vinegar
chain.
cloths,
The path
herbal
back
pit
toward the
paste,
squares lined
and
with
communal
fences that
lice
lean
picking you've
like
made it
tired
work,
old men, a
you've learned to
cart
live with the
sweeps
grime.
somewhere behind
And
you.
in doing
You turn
so,
your face
you've found something
toward the
more
sound
important than
and
soap.
catch the scent of onions.
You've found dignity.
Desperation.
Because being a
You're
medieval
headed to
peasant
market,
isn't
not
about
to
being
sell nothing
spotless,
finished
it's
and ready
about
yet, but to see if
survival.
you can trade
About
or beg
carving out a sense
or
of
both.
self in a
You've
world
got a
that
chipped
smells like
spoon and a
onions and
small
fear.
coin from the boy earlier.
And
It isn't
somehow,
much, but it's
you've
more than
done
you
it.
had yesterday. The
You've
market
figured
isn't
out how to walk
bustling,
through your
not
village without
yet.
flinching at
Just
your
a
own
few scattered
aroma.
figures wrapped in cloaks.
How to smile
Each one
despite the
moving with the
dirt under
slowness
your
of someone who didn't
fingernails.
sleep well. You
How to
nod at an
laugh
old
while
woman
squatting
stirring
behind the
pot that
hedge.
Smells like turnips and vengeance.
You
She
toss the
doesn't
last
smile
cabbage
back.
into the cart
That's
and stretch your
normal.
back
You
until it
approach the
cracks.
man selling cheese or
A neighbor
something,
walks by and
trying to
nods.
impersonate cheese.
You nod
You
back.
pick up a wedge.
That's
It's
it.
soft in the middle.
That's the whole
hard at the
interaction.
edge, and smells like
But it's full of
considering
something
violence.
powerful
You sniff,
respect.
then you don't sniff.
They saw you hauling water from the stream when it
How
froze.
much? You asked he.
They saw
How's
you
your
boil
spoon?
linen in a pot
That?
so blackened
The
with
coin?
soot it
You
looked like a
hesitate.
cauldron.
It's just a spoon.
They watched you
Just a
drag your
coin.
laundry
But
through
that's
thorn
all
bushes
through
just to
tomorrow.
find clean
Or later
water.
today if things go wrong.
You've earned your
Till
smell.
your daughter hasn't tasted cheese in
And guess
weeks.
what? So have
You
they...
trade.
It
He
turns out that
grunts
even with
approval
the
and wraps
constant
the wedge in a
filth,
scrap of cloth
the
that
cold
used to be part of
baths,
a shirt. You
the
nod
goat-related
thanks and slide it
injuries,
into your satchel
and the
like
plague
it's treasure
paranoia,
it is.
peasants
You
still
tell
found
yourself
ways to
you'll
care
save
about
it.
their
Maybe
appearance.
for lunch, maybe for
Maybe
her
not in the way
birthday.
nobles did
Maybe
with perfumed
for when
oils
someone
and
cries.
gold-plated
You
soap
wander
dishes,
the
but with what they
stall,
had.
which is generous language.
Rags,
Most are crates
herbs,
or blankets laid
soap
out
that
with
could kill a
bundles of
small
wild
bug on
garlic,
contact.
lumps of black bread or buckets
Odd
of dried
fact.
peas.
Some
One
peasants
man
believed
sells
dirt
pickled
itself
something.
had protective
Doesn't say
properties
why.
literally
You pass the
called
church on the way
good,
back.
honest
Not
earth.
because you're feeling
They thought
particularly
clean skin
holy,
made you
but
vulnerable.
because it's warmer than
Which,
outside. The doors are
honestly,
open. Smoke
checks
from
out
the
after that
censer
one
curling
bath
through
that
the
gave
air
you
like
a
lazy
week-long
serpent.
rash and a
You
new respect
slip
for
inside
lukewarm
for a moment.
puddles.
Feel the stillness
Historians
wrap
still
around you
debate
like
whether
an
this
old
pride and
shawl.
peasant resilience
There's no
was
one in the
widespread,
pews, just a
or
faint
just found in
creak of
local
wood and
traditions
the
passed
lingering
down
smell
orally.
of wax, pine, and secret.
But you
sit
know
for
what
a
you've
moment,
seen.
Not to pray, not quite.
You've seen
Just
old
to
women
sit.
wear
You
their
stare at the
soot-streaked
icon of a
cheeks like
saint
war
whose name
paint.
you never learned. He
Young
looks
boys slick their
tired.
hair with
His
bacon
eyes
grease
say
before
he
festivals.
has heard enough confessions
You've seen
and
your
knows
neighbor
some
light a
teeny
candle
chores to
and
top
wash her
off the
face in the
week.
dark,
You wonder if he was a
singing
porno
softly
once,
to herself
or
because
hungry,
sometimes
or real.
you clean not
Get
for
out,
others,
stay
but for
long.
your own
Outside,
heart.
the sun's
Today,
finally dragging itself into the
you
sky
take one
like
of
it
your
owes
last
someone
good
rent.
cloths, a piece of
Clouds
linen
move
that
back,
hasn't been turned into a chicken bandage, and soak it in chamomile tea.
Color of old tin.
You wipe your face,
Doesn't warm.
rinse your arms, and rub your palms with crushed rosemary.
On the way you passed, three
You smell
boys
like
throwing
soup.
rocks at a frozen puddle.
Sure,
One of
but
them slips
also
and
like
falls.
someone who
The others
tried.
laugh. You don't stop them.
You sit
You're
by the
not
fire that
the
evening,
constable. You're not
tuning
even
out
the
your
father
brother's
to any of
burping
them. But
contest
still,
and the
for a
goat who
second,
keeps trying
you
to sit
imagine
in your
telling them
lap.
to stop. Then you imagine
Your clothes are
getting hit with a
patched.
rock for the trouble.
Your hair is
Keep
tied back
walking.
with
A
string.
cart creaks past.
Your skin is
The
dry.
driver nods.
Your
His
elbows
horse
are
looks
cracked,
lost
but your
in your
spirit,
boots. It wheezes with
sparkling.
every step, steam puffing from its
You
nose
fall
like it's
asleep that night
practicing to
not
be a
thinking
dragon.
about baths or
Wonder if
filth
you
or
could
social
trade for the
rank.
manure.
You
Use
fall
it for
asleep
the
thinking about
garden.
how strong you are.
Or
How
just to
resourceful.
remember what horses smell
How
like
hygienically
at home.
defiant.
The dog growls
And when the
again.
wind howls through the
Fires
cracks
low,
in the
but not
wall,
dead. Your wife
bringing with
is
it the
awake
scent of
now,
chimney smoke and
kneeling by
mud,
the hearth, stirring
you smile
something
in your
the pot.
sleep.
You can smell parsnips
Because you
and
don't need to be
hope.
squeaky
She
clean to
glances
feel
at
human.
sees the
You just
cloth
need
in
to
your
show
hand.
up.
Cheese,
Try
she says.
scrub where it
softly.
counts.
You nod. She doesn't smile, but her
And
shoulders
every
drop
now and
slightly. You
then,
hand it over.
remember the power of
We'll
rosemary in your
save it, she
armpits.
says.
Now,
You
as the
already
fire
knew that.
dims low
But
and the
here it is.
shadows stretch
Your
long,
daughter has drawn
your
shapes
hut
in the
quiets
ash by the
around
heart.
you.
One looks like a star.
the warmth from
One
the
looks like
hearth
a goat.
slowly
One might be
fades,
you
but your
tousle
blankets
her hair
carry
and
the
sit
heat of a
down
long
beside her.
day's
The
work.
floor is still
You
cold,
breathe in
but your
deeply, not the
bones
scent
have
of
adjusted.
perfume or
Lunch
fresh
will
linen,
come. Maybe not
but the
soon,
soft,
but maybe soon
earthy
enough.
smell of
You
wood
lean
smoke,
back eyes on the fire.
hay,
Your stomach
and
growls
dried
again,
herbs that
and this
cradle you
time,
like a
you
familiar
don't shush it.
lullaby.
You let it speak. It's earned that
Outside,
right. The house smells better than it has
a
in
gentle
days.
wind
The
brushes
parsnip
past
is
the door,
boiling into softness.
humming a tune
Its
through the cracks in the
sweetness
wall.
teasing the air. There's even a
Somewhere in the
sprig of something
distance,
green in the pot
an
wild
owl
thyme,
hoots.
maybe. Or one of the
The chickens
misery
rustle
herbs
in their
your neighbor
sleep.
swore would ward off
The
cough
goats
husband.
sigh
You don't
contentedly,
care what it does as long
and the
as it
night
doesn't
settles over the
taste
village like a wool
despair.
cloak.
You
You
crouch
curl
by the
deeper into
fire,
your straw
watching the
mattress,
bubbles rise,
eyes
break,
heavy,
and vanish.
body still buzzing from the memory of sun on your
This is the
face and
midday meal.
cold
Not
water
quite
on your
lunch,
skin.
not quite survival
You did what you
ration.
could.
You don't call it anything,
You
Rick.
survived.
It just is a small
You cared.
promise that the second half of
You
the day
carried
might
your
be
dignity in
Your wife
every
lays
splash
it
of water,
carefully into wooden bowls.
every
Yours
rubbed
has a
sprig of
crack
mint,
that leaks if you tilt
every
it
time you
too
stared down a
far.
chamber pot
So
and
you
whispered,
cradle it like a newborn chick
"Not
with
today."
separation anxiety. The warmth
And now,
seeps into
it's
your
enough.
home.
Let the
For a
stars
moment,
shine above
it
your
feels
thatched
like enough.
roof.
Your daughter
Let
eats
the dreams
first.
come gently,
No one says this out
like a
loud
breeze
anymore.
across the fields.
It's just what happens.
You've
She
earned
sits
your
cross-legged
rest.
near the hearth,
You've
blowing
earned your
on her
peace.
spoon like it's a flute. Her cheeks are
From the
flushed
muddy
firelight
footpaths
and
to the
hunger.
steaming
She
wash
slopes
tubs to
make
the
the food
honest stench of
again.
peasant
She'll
pride
learn
you
to
were
like
there.
bitter. Your
You
wife
lived
mutters.
it.
Like
Sleep
the
well, you
rest of
filthy
us.
little miracle.
Smile. Briefly,